Tonight on Brian Ross Investigates, the showdown between the U.S. and Iran.
Our great American forces are prepared for anything. Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing.
As President Trump trades threats with the Iranians, what will it take to keep the crisis from escalating into a full-out war? We're joined by former White House national security official Richard Clarke. Plus, a crisis for American law enforcement, a record number of police suicides.
It's been a long and dark year for the NYPD.
A sobering start to the new year for the Chicago Police Department.
A somber moment for the Phoenix Police Department.
Officers under stress.
After the event, I drank every single day after work.
Fearful of a stigma if they seek help.
We have to change the culture that just because you talk to somebody doesn't mean that you're weak.
Police officials desperately seeking answers.
What the hell's going on here?
And our shout-out for the reporter who helped to expose a congressman living a life of luxury with campaign money.
The fact is that the case began when Morgan Cook published an article in the UT.
From the Law&Crime Network studios in New York City's Herald Square, this is Brian Ross Investigates. And good evening, Happy New Year, and welcome. A worldwide sigh of relief this week when it appeared the showdown between the U.S. and Iran had hit the pause button. After the U.S. targeted and killed Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, the retaliation that the Iranians promised was an attack on 2 U.S. bases in Iraq that did little damage and resulted in no U.S. or Iraqi casualties. President Trump was quick to announce all is well.
Our great American forces are prepared for anything. Iran appears to be standing down, which is a good thing for all parties concerned and a very good thing for the world.
To understand this better, we're now joined by Richard Clarke, who served in the White House for both Democrats and Republicans and is now the chairman of the Middle East Institute. Mr. Clarke, thanks for being here. Has Iran really backed down? Did the other side blink here?
I think they did. I think the United States and Donald Trump got lucky because they were dealing with a very professional and highly calculating Iranian decision-making apparatus. And I think they made a decision to play for the long term, which is getting the U.S. out of Iraq, and not create a near-term crisis, which would have caused both sides a lot of damage. So
for better or worse, did this validate President Trump's decision to attack the general, take him out?
It may have. He was presented, Trump was presented by the Pentagon with a range of options that he could use to respond to the increasing pressure being put on Americans in Iraq by the Quds Force and by Soleimani. And Trump went for the most extreme option presented, which was to kill Soleimani. Other presidents have looked at that and decided that was too risky. In fact, in any normal administration, there would actually be a risk document that would lay out the risks associated with each option. The option he chose was highly risky, but it worked out. And it worked out in part because the Iranians thought he was unpredictable, thought he might go extreme again and do a massive attack on them in response to anything they did. And therefore, they chose to blink. Brian, they did this once before, historically. They were involved in the Iran-Iraq war for 8 years. And then the United States, by mistake, the United States Navy, shot down a civilian Iranian aircraft. And the Ayatollah at the time said, oops, the United States is coming in on the side of Iraq, which we weren't, and we can't stand up to the United States militarily right now. Rather than risk the revolution, rather than risk the regime, we'll stand down for now and we'll beat them in the end. That kind of historical lesson is known very well to the decision makers in Tehran. They know that happened. And I think they repeated that calculus. Don't fall for the bait that would allow the United States to get involved in a military operation, which would hurt everybody, including the United States. Back off, back down, and regroup, and do a long game where the United States will lose.
So in your view, the risk of future attacks by Iran against U.S. forces or military personnel is now greatly diminished?
I would say it's diminished, certainly not greatly diminished. The reason they were attacking us in the first place remains, and that is that the United States has put a world of hurt on the Iranian economy. So bad that the Iranian people rose up in November and December in minor rebellions throughout the country, and somewhere between 600 and 1,500 Iranians were killed. And I think at the end of the day, they thought it's too hard to calculate that with Donald Trump. One day he does nothing when the Iranians blow up Saudi oil fields and with drones and missiles. And the next day he goes crazy because one American contractor got killed in an attack on a base. They made a rational decision to back off.
Well, Richard Clarke, thank you so much for joining us. Up next, crisis in American law enforcement, the soaring number of police suicides. More officers take their lives than are killed in the line of duty. On a day today that was marked by the FBI as National Law Enforcement Appreciation Day, we're going to talk about a crisis in law enforcement that is only now beginning to get the attention it deserves. An epidemic of police suicides across the country.
It's been a long and dark year for the NYPD, an incessant drumbeat of despair thanks to an epidemic of suicide that has spread like a virus through the nation's biggest police department.
A sobering start to the new year for the Chicago Police Department, which saw one of its members take his life. This is the fifth suicide by a Chicago Police Department officer in the past 6 months.
A somber moment for the Phoenix Police Department, as today they remember the life of one of their own. Former Phoenix officer Craig Tiger took his own life after his family said he battled PTSD.
After the event, I drank every single day after work. Every day.
Why?
Self-medicate. Trying to erase, trying to forget what happened, trying to erase it, trying to help me sleep.
Craig assured us he was okay. In retrospect, I'm sure he was just himself protecting us. As we knew, today he was not okay.
2019 saw a record number of deaths by suicide among the nation's law enforcement officers. 228 former or current officers took their lives last year. That's a 32% increase over 2018.
Police commissioners from around the country say removing the stigma of seeking help is the first step in combating this epidemic.
The outspoken police union president, Pat Lynch, has accused the NYPD of sidelining officers who do seek counseling.
Stop destroying the careers of cops who reach out for help.
We have to change the culture that just because you talk to somebody doesn't mean that you're weak.
We have done a woefully terrible job in providing support to officers.
It just almost knocked me down. It just took the wind right out of me. I just, what the hell's going on here?
And the department wants all officers and citizens to know if you or someone you know needs help, please call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255.
Now to gain better understanding what is behind this epidemic of police suicides and what is and is not being done are three people who know a lot about this. In the studio here, former New York City Police Detective Nick Casale, who knows a number of officers who have taken their lives. By Skype from Washington, D.C. is Chuck Weckler, the Executive Director of the Police Executive Research Foundation, PERF, whose group is out this year on an important new study on the problem. And by Skype from Massachusetts, Karen Solomon, the co-founder of a group called Blue Help and the wife of a police officer. Karen, let me start with you if I can. Do we really know the actual number of people and officers who've taken their lives?
No, we don't. We only know what's been reported to us at Blue Help, and this year 228 suicides were reported to us. That number has increased over the years, but we don't really know if it's because suicides are increasing or if it's because people are reporting them to us more often. So until this is tracked nationally by the FBI, similar to what line of duty deaths and injuries are tracked, we're not really ever going to know that number because it's not mandated reporting. A lot of our information comes to us from the families or from the news media.
And Chuck Weckler, let me ask you, you write in your report that when an officer is killed in the line of duty, there are big services. We know everything about what happened there. But in a suicide, we don't know that much. You talk about the need for what you call psychological autopsies.
Right. Psychological autopsies refer to what happened, looking at what were the factors involved, and so much of that information isn't captured. You know, researchers have been looking at this problem for a long time. They have theories, it's work-related, and other people say it's personal issues. If departments conducted a psychological autopsy, meaning they went back and they looked at all the factors and were able to share that information, that would be a tremendous advantage in preventing it. But even we're in 2020 and we still really can't say why someone takes their life. I think one of the factors we do know which makes police officers different is the fact that they have a firearm. And I remember John Timoney would say, you know, when someone has a difficult issue and they go home and, you know, they might have a few drinks and then at night they go to sleep. Next day they're fine. For a police officer, if he or she has a firearm, that makes it really a difficult situation. So I think what makes this so hard is we don't know really still in 2020 why officers take their lives.
And Detective Nick Cassell, let me ask you, you've known a number of officers who've taken their lives. How many?
At least a half a dozen. But there is no common factor. It's an abundance of things that are going on. I may disagree with the fact that the officer does have a firearm because, I mean, look, you go to places like Texas, Arizona, Vermont, where gun ownership is everywhere. So when you look at it, there has to be this combination of why these officers do it. And I think one of the factors Pat Lynch of the NYPD PBA really hit upon was the culture. You know, no matter how we look at the police department, it's this macho culture. And when you seek help, whether it's through it's confidential or not, you're still missing, and everybody assumes that you're going through some sort of psychological issue. And it's going to look bad on you in the present and in the future when you seek assignment or promotion. You know, of the at least half a dozen officers that I know that have killed themselves, there was no common nexus.
All right, a question from our control room from executive producer Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda?
Karen, at Blue Help, you told us you get a lot of phone calls. Are families aware of what's going on, or is this something officers keep hidden from everyone?
You know, that's really interesting because some of the families contact us and they're very surprised that they're not the only family. So when we introduce them to other families or we bring them together, we have events for these families, we bring them together, they can't believe how many officers have taken their lives. They're actually quite surprised because it's not something until recently that has been made really publicly known through the media. You know, in 2019, we had excellent media coverage. There's a lot of awareness and attention to this. But prior to that, we didn't know. And even now, there are families who don't realize that there are so many officers taking their own lives. And they don't find us until after the fact. So truly, unless they were looking for it before, how would they know about all these other officers?
Chuck Weckler, let me ask you, you talk with police chiefs all the time. What are they doing about this issue, the stigma of seeking help?
Well, I think that's what's different. I think that's, if there's anything positive in this story, is an awareness among police chiefs that they have to speak out about it. I just saw Ed Rossler from Fairfax County down in Houston, and he was talking about it. He was, you know, has really made this his issue. Jimmy O'Neill in New York, Eddie Johnson in Chicago. They've recognized that this issue needs leadership. It needs the person at the top to say, look, it's okay to get help. And we're going to make sure that you don't get stigmatized in some way for this. So I think leadership on this issue is huge. That's what's different. This isn't a new issue. I think what's new about this is that we're aware of it. And I think the number of officers that take their lives is greatly underreported. So I think, you know, leadership really matters.
And Mr. Weschler, is it recognized among the ranks that this is a real issue, among the rank and file of the officers?
Oh, absolutely, too. Interesting, Ed Rossler in Houston said, he said, there's a duty to intervene. You know, we talk about that in terms of preventing use of force, but in this case, duty to intervene, meaning if you see an officer and he's having a difficult time, then there's a responsibility to help him, to get him help, whether it's an EAP program or a peer-to-peer program, somehow getting involved, listening very carefully. And departments are training officers what to listen for, how to get help, where to go to get help. I think the good news here is the awareness has never been better. The question is still, though, what is pushing this issue?
And do you have a good sense of that, Nick Cassell? What is pushing this issue? Is it the increased assaults against police, complaints of misconduct?
I think it's everything. There is both the pressures, seeing the calamity and horrors during your tour, the stigmas at work, the pressure from the public, the administration's pressure to always be right. I mean, it's a very stressful job being a police officer, and I think that we as Chuck Wessler said, we have to look at this and we have to analyze it. But Pat Lynch, again with the PBA, is touting more outside the department. I don't agree with the way the former police commissioner, Jimmy O'Neill, handled it. I think that they should be looking to help the rank and file. You have to go to the people the rank and file admire and respect, and that's the unions need to have a larger part in this.
All right, well, want to hear more about this. Nick Cassell, Chuck Wexler, Karen Solomon, thank you all for being here tonight to help us understand this very disturbing trend among America's law enforcement officers. Up next, our shout out for the reporter whose work led to the resignation this week of a powerful member of Congress. Republican Congressman Duncan Hunter of California resigned this week from Congress without offering an explanation of why. But as we first reported last year, the why was no secret to readers of the San Diego Union Tribune, where reporter Morgan Cook spent more than a year investigating how the congressman was breaking the law by using campaign money as a personal piggy bank. It was $1,000 spent on video games that led to the downfall of a popular California Republican congressman. Congressman Duncan Hunter blamed his teenage son, saying he mistakenly billed some $1,300 to his campaign instead of using the family's personal credit card. But at the San Diego Union Tribune, reporter Morgan Cook wasn't buying that excuse, as she discovered other questionable expenditures in the records the congressman had filed.
We saw a charge for oral and facial surgery. We saw a new garage door. There were strange patterns of charges, lots of gas stations, lots of grocery stores, lots of fast food.
A $229 charge at the Star Trader store at Disneyland that the congressman claimed was for food and beverages for the campaign.
So I call and I'm like, what kind of food do you guys have? And they said, well, we have Pez and a Star Wars themed Rice Krispie treat. And I was like, wow, somebody's gonna have a tummy ache.
Prosecutors would later document a $9,200 trip to Italy for Hunter and his wife Margaret, who also pleaded guilty to a criminal count, along with travel to Hawaii, resorts in Arizona, money spent in Washington allegedly to pay for a series of extramarital affairs, even $600 in airfare for the family pet rabbit named Egbert. Cook says she knew almost immediately she was on to something big.
You know, we kind of couldn't really let it go. It's like every question we answered, there was another question and another question, and everywhere we looked, there was another question. So we couldn't really let up.
Hunter, first elected in 2008 and succeeding his father of the same name, was a well-known and popular figure in the halls of Congress. And as prosecutors closed in, he said he was being investigated for what were only accounting mistakes, calling it a witch hunt aimed at him because he was an outspoken defender of President Trump.
They could try to have a political agenda as our law enforcement, as a U.S. government. I think we've seen with Strzok and what the FBI and the DOJ have been doing. Let's let them expose themselves for what they are, and that's a politically motivated group of folks.
But late last year, the congressman changed his tune, pleading guilty to one count of conspiracy to convert campaign funds to personal use, likely to face time in prison when he is sentenced later this year.
I failed to monitor and account for my campaign spending. I made mistakes, and that's what today was all about.
The federal prosecutor on the case, Phil Halperin, said there was nothing political about it, that the investigation began only after he read the reporting by Morgan Cook in the San Diego Union Tribune.
The fact is that the case began when Morgan Cook published an article in the UT. I read that article, I discussed it with Emily Allen and then Mark Conover. I went to the FBI and we said, look at this, is there a case? And after that, we consulted with people in DOJ who, in this administration, made the decision, to indict Representative Hunter. Nothing could have been more apolitical than the process that was involved here. In fact, today, in many ways, is a triumph for the press and shows the importance of having a free press that not only can the people rely on, but that the Department of Justice can turn to for guidance.
Cook was one of the reporters outside the courthouse and was stunned to hear what the prosecutor had to say about her.
I mean, I think that's what I heard, but that doesn't sound like something that I would hear in.
I was very much caught off guard because usually when people call us out, it's not to tell us the great job we did and how much we helped and how important we are.
Cook became an overnight journalism sensation, her reporting cited by the networks and national newspapers, a major career break.
I think it would take a lot for me to leave San Diego. I think I can still learn a lot here. I can still grow here. I can still do the work that I'm capable of here. And it's a really special newsroom because everyone is on everyone else's team. And they helped carry me. If I could do it better with help, they contributed their skill. And I've just been really lucky to be in a newsroom where I have colleagues who support me and support this work and are willing to give what they can to that.
And that's our program for tonight. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you back here next week.